So this is the research presentation for Natalie Prager, recorded for March 15th, 2016 for English 2089. My essay was about the validity of slang as a linguistic device. Basically, I sometimes find out that slang is not really viewed as like something that's a valid form of communication, and people say that it's like not as legitimate as other like proper English. So I wanted to examine that and see whether or not that was real or not. So I brought in my friend Liz Bradford.
Hello!
To ask me questions about my project and my research, and then I'll answer the questions as best I can. So yeah, basically my project was about researching whether or not slang was a valid form of communication, and why it was valid, why it was legitimate, and why it shouldn't be looked down upon.
So how can you prove that it's legitimate?
Well, I went through 3 different branches of proving that slang's legitimacy. I looked at its definition, so what is it by itself, where does it come from, and then how does it function, like how do we use it and why do we use it. Yeah.
How did you find out what slang really is?
So I, first of all, just Googled the dictionary.com definition of what is slang. And I found that they said it was a very informal usage in vocabulary and idiom that is characteristically more metaphorical, playful, elliptical, vivid, and ephemeral than ordinary language. I thought that was really interesting, particularly the end part. They said that it was ordinary language. They didn't say it was improper. So I was like, okay, like they're not invalidating slang. They're just saying it's different. It's not what you would consider like what's regular. And I also found this really neat interview that they did a while ago through BBC, and unfortunately the BBC website didn't give me a date, but they gave me the name of this linguist, Amos Paran, who described the differences between slang and jargon, which I thought was also really interesting because it's kind of like...
What is the difference?
Well, so slang is different from jargon in that jargon is like words that are used between like people who are in a certain profession. So Liz and I are both in industrial design, and we use these terms type A's, type B's, and type C's for different levels of sketching. So a type A would be like a really low level, quickly done sketch, and a type C would be like a photorealistic rendering, and that is that's jargon because it's used between designers. It's not slang because it's not used between like an informal group. It's a professional.
So it's something that the entire group understands is happening.
Yeah, it's something that like if you're using like type A to refer to a sketch, like you're a designer, and if you're not, then you're probably not a designer. So basically, like that definition kind of helped me see what slang isn't, because like I would think before I did that research, I thought of like type A's and type B's and type C's as designer slang, but they're really jargon. There's a difference there. So basically, what I figured out was that by definition, slang is legitimate. It's just like it's not traditional. It's not what you would ordinarily consider real language. So
if it's not traditional, where does it come from?
So that's a really good question, Liz. I found this online etymology dictionary that was really cool. It showed me like where all sorts of different words came from. And I looked up a few different words, one that was like a slang word and one that wasn't really a slang word. So I found this word bummy, which was like something that you would use to describe things like kind of run down or gross or whatever. And it actually came from German-American soldiers during the Civil War would start to use it to describe things, and it came from this other German word. And then it kind of worked its way into English, and by the same way, like the word lackey, which is like somebody like a follower, like somebody's like underman, I don't know. But they like that word actually came from Turkish, and then it went through Spanish and French before finally going through to English. And it was through this like evolution of language that we got the word that we have today. And then also like a lot of people say things like, oh, like a word isn't legitimate unless it's in the dictionary. So CBS actually covered this big controversy once they added like Ginormous to the dictionary. I don't know if you remember that, because it was when we were like in middle school.
That was crazy.
Yeah, like everybody got
Mind's
really mad.
blown.
Yeah, like why was everybody so upset about it? And they were like, these words aren't real, and like that same year they added DVR to the dictionary. And
Oh no.
So I kind of realized like that just because a word may be added to the dictionary doesn't necessarily mean that it's not really slang. And vice versa, just because a word isn't in the dictionary doesn't really mean that it's not slang. That was something that CBS did. And then there's also, recently we've come across internet slang, which is different than regular slang in that it comes from like abbreviations and acronyms and things like that, which make them easier to type out, or they make more sense online as opposed to like if they're spoken.
Can you give me an example of that?
So for instance,
Is that like text? Does
like,
that apply to text stuff like LOL?
Yeah, so
Or
LOL, like
what's roll on floor?
Yeah, like ROFL or whatever it is. Yeah. So like you wouldn't like say ROFL in like ordinary conversation with like, we probably wouldn't say it to each other right now, but it still makes sense. We both know what we're talking about.
Does it count?
Does it count as slang?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely counts as slang. Because it comes through that same like evolution. Like somebody found a word or a set of words that already existed, rolling on the floor laughing, and then they were like, "What's an easier like what's a different way for me to say this?" ROFL. And now like when you see it, like let's say that you see the word like ROFL or LOL or whatever, like you don't in your head translate that. You just already know what it means. It's like it's like a standalone word.
It takes its own course then.
Yeah, it kind of becomes its own thing. And like DVR, which was again like that was added to the dictionary in like 2007. That was another big one. Like that's an acronym for like digital video recording or something like that. So, but that like I mean most people don't even know what that means. So
it's true. They just know DVR.
So, yeah, and then all languages kind of evolve the same way as slang does. Like they come from the source language and then they sort of move and develop on their own and become their own, like the terms within them become their own standalone thing. So that, I feel like that makes slang just as legitimate as any other language because it evolves in the same way. So.
What does slang do?
Well, like, what do you mean?
Why do we use it instead of formal language?
Well, I think that there's two big things that I found when I was looking at the different functions of slang. One of them goes more for spoken slang, and the other one goes more for internet slang. So when we're like speaking to each other, we use slang to show that you kind of belong to a group or like a set of people. So, and that's I think why I thought initially, like going back to what we were saying before about like the types of sketches, like I thought that saying type A was a type of slang, but it's really a type of jargon, because groups don't have to be like formal settings. Like jargon is used in like a workplace or whatever, but slang is just used to show that you belong to a group of people, like a younger group or an older group. So like for instance, like the word cool, I found it's like everybody uses nowadays. It's like a common English word. But that originated in the 1920s when jazz enthusiasts were like using it to describe jazz. And they said it's cool. It's like, and it kind of meant like sophisticated.
Ah, that's so cool.
Yeah. But it like nobody really like today, like nobody even really thinks of it kind of being in that same context. And like when you say the word cool, you don't even like it. What's
idea.
Cool? Like it means cool. Like you know what it means. You know how to use it properly. And it's funny. Like I was looking at the definition of it, and I couldn't even think. Like I was trying to define it for myself. Like what is cool? And it was like, cool is cool. Like you don't like you already like it kind of took on its own thing. But like it was neat seeing where it came from, and it was used by those jazz enthusiasts. Like if somebody said like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Like they were probably a jazz fan. And then it just worked its way into the common vernacular.
Wow.
And then this other instance that I was looking at, back to like that linguist I was mentioning before, Amos Paran, he said like he couldn't say the word wicked because like he's not a kid, and like if he was like, yeah man, that's wicked or that's sick, like people would kind of look at him funny because he doesn't belong to that group of like younger people.
He's too old.
Exactly. He's like he's too old. He's not part of that group.
So that would be jargon to him. Like that group would be jargon.
Not quite, because it's not a formal interaction. Like they're not in a formal setting. They're not part of a profession. It's just like a general, like it's a loosely defined group. You know what I mean? But it kind of reminded me of like the 30 Rock Kit bit. Have you ever seen that with Steve Buscemi?
No, I haven't.
There's like this scene in 30 Rock in one of the episodes, and Steve Buscemi comes in and he's dressed up. He's like going undercover in like a middle school. So he wears like a backwards baseball cap and a hoodie. He's got like a skateboard under his arm, and he goes up to these kids and he's like, "What's up, fellow kid?" And, like he keeps walking, and all the kids are like,
Trying to
"What?"
belong.
Yeah, and like the reason why that's funny is because he so clearly doesn't belong. And I feel like it's the same thing with like somebody who doesn't belong to a certain group using the slang of that group. Like it's pretty clear that they don't belong to it. So they can use it. They just like it doesn't make sense for them to, and they stand out if they do. So, and then as far as the other example of slangs, like one of slang's functions, which was the internet slang, I found this really cool article from HubSpot, which kind of explained where like different forms of slang around the world, and or internet slang specifically, and they were talking about like abbreviations which are used to make typing easier. So that's like a function of slang, which is just like to make the way that you communicate easier. For example, like some people on the internet will use like an S to indicate that they're being sarcastic, which is something you can't convey over text, but like that little S like means sarcasm. Or another cool, really neat example that there I am using the word cool. But this really neat example that I found in this article was apparently in Thailand, the Thai letter H looks like the number 5. So instead of writing like ha 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 or like LOL or whatever, in Thailand they write 555 to show that they're laughing. And I thought that was neat because it's like a different.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird and it's different, and it's like it's also really cool because it shows that this isn't just limited to English. Like this is a universal function of slang, is to make typing easier and to facilitate communication, especially online, where sometimes like the speed of your response matters. So yeah, all these functions are basically universal, and since it's not confined to English, it makes it legitimate. It's not just like a trend in English speech or whatever. So yeah.
Interesting. I'm glad I know that.
There you go.
I'll use it more, and I'll understand it.
So do you have any other questions, Liz, that you might want me to answer? Or
I think that about solves it for me.
Cool. So I will add all the sources that I referenced in this podcast or recording, whatever I want to call it, to my submission. But thank you very much for listening, Professor Stewart, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.